Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Shvis, Perek Yud, Halacha Aleph. We're learning today Daf Pei Beis. We left off on Daf Pei Beis, Amid Aleph, Mamish, on top of the Amid, and we are in the middle of learning the sugya of Beis Din being Mekadesh the Chodesh. We're going to actually learn two braises that will be expounding the same pasuk that we have in Parshas Emor. That what the Torah says, Mo'adei Hashem Asher Tikru Oisam Mikra Kodesh, Elehei Moyadoi. We're going to have different limudim that are learned from this same pasuk, and from there the Gemara is going to go back to the case of the Mishnah, where you had the butcher that sold the meat on the 30th of Elul of the 7th year, and then it turned out that the 30th of Elul remained the 30th of Elul. It did not turn into Rosh Hashanah, v'chulei, and a lot of what we learned on Daf Pei, how the Gemara explained that the case of the Mishnah must be following the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda that holds that a store owner, whenever he extends credit a second time, that second extension automatically transforms the first credit into a loan, which is why, therefore, now that the 30th of Elul remains the 30th of Elul, Shvius will cancel the loan. Now, from there, we're going to go into a very huge sugya. And again, you see from the Yerushalmi, the different girsois, that it's min hakotze el hakotze will be the consequence. One sugya is connected to the other. The first is hamalve es chaveroi al menashe loy lotavoi. And don't forget, we already learned, and we're going to review, that the same pasuk that says loy, that says that you have to be meshamet alone, the same pasuk that says that the loan is canceled, that pasuk says lo yigois, don't approach the fellow who owes you money. So what's going to happen if there is a loan that anyways you cannot approach him? So perhaps because, for example, I'm giving you money, and the agreement was I will never demand payment. Perhaps that type of loan, since anyways there is no need for the loy yigois, so when it says shamoit kol bal mashe yadoi, maybe the shamoit is not relevant either. And me'ingen le'ingen, what happens if a person lends the money and he says explicitly, I'm lending you money, al menah sheloy tisham tenu shvis, on the condition that the Shvius won't cancel the loan. And don't forget that generally, the Dinei Mamanis, when it comes to financial matters, a person has the right to waive all of the rights and protections granted to him by the Torah, by financial matters. So the question is such a declaration, effective or not effective? Will Shvius be Meshamet? Will Shvius not be Meshamet? There are two different Gersois in the Gemara. Mamish, either mishamet or not mishamet. And that's also connected to the topic that we have also. We learned this in the Bavli. What happens if a person lends money to someone else, for example, for 10 years? In other words, during the year of Shemitah, the loan is not due. And again, and therefore, anyways, you can't collect. And the logic is, if you anyways cannot collect, not because of the love of lo yigois, then perhaps the positive commandment of shamoit kol bal mashe yodei, if the lo yigois is not shaykh, the shamoit is not shaykh. So will that be nullified? Will that not be nullified? Now here clearly there's a brayse that says it will be nullified, but perhaps it's going to be. It's only. The brayse says it's not nullified, but perhaps it's not nullified because there was a mashkin. We learned in our Mishnah. Or because there was a prusbul. And anyways, as we're going to unpackage this a little bit today, God willing, a little bit tomorrow, we're going to see, we're going to have to follow the Gemara with one mahalach, because it gets very confusing going back and forth. But just to be aware that because of the, let's say, the corruption of the text, we didn't know what it says. Therefore, all of the noise kalim, each one had another girsa, and the whole Gemara changes from one end to the other. Okay, Chaver Daf Pei Beis Amud Aleph. Okay, the sugya of being Mekadesh the Chodesh. So we're going to learn a general rule about Beis Din's power of declaring a day into Rosh Chodesh. Says the Braisa, what happens if Kichu Koidam Lizmanoi? If Beis Din declared Rosh Chodesh prior to its time, writes the Marafuld on top of the Amid. What happens if they turned Chavtes into Aleph, making the prior month only a month of 28 days? Or Oy acheri buray. Again, says the Marafulda, 2 lines from the top, or Beis Din allowed 30th to remain 30th, which can happen. They allowed the 31st to remain the 31st. And in a Yiddish calendar, there is no day, there's no month of 31 days, but they did that. And they declared day 32 into day number 1. That's the way the Marafulda learns. That's acheri buray. And either direction, yoim echad, only 1 day. The Braisa is not talking about declaring day 27th or day 26th. We're not talking about that. We're talking about either making the prior month a month of 28 days instead of the normal short month of 29, or making the month into a day of 31 days. Says the Pnei Moshe, just quickly, and we're going to go back to the Marafulda. Look on top. Look inside the top Pnei Moshe. Kichu koydem zmanikin mefarish lekame koydem lezmane b'yom chavtes la'acheri buda b'yom lamed beis. It sounds like the same. It's not the same. Pnei Moshe learns the Braisa is not talking about Beis Din declaring Yom Chavtes into Rosh Chodesh. No, they're saying that on Yom Chavtes they declared that tomorrow will be Rosh Chodesh, or they declared on Yom Lamed Beis that yesterday was Rosh Chodesh. That's the Pnei Moshe's pshat. The Braisa is zicher, not even talking about a case where they're making a month into a 28th day or into a 31 day. The Marafulda doesn't learn that way. He's saying that the Braisa is speaking about a scenario that Yochol Yehei Mekudesh, you would think that if they did it, then it's effective. And you know why you would think so? Because we know from other Braisas that even if Beis Din made a mistake in their cheshbonos, and we'll see later, even if the Eidim turn out to be Eidim Zoimimim, the Eidim upon which we base the sighting of the moon, the Chodesh remains Mekudash. What they do, Atem, Oisam, Atem, Afilu Mutoim, Afilu Shogegim, Afilu Mezidim. So the question is, how far do you extend their power? So let's go with the extreme, the Marafulda, that there's even a Havamina, that if they declared Yom Chavtes Aleph, they declared Yom Lamed Beis Aleph, you might think it worked. No. So Talmud Leimer, here's the pasuk in Emor. Again, the pasuk reads, David b'nei Yisrael v'martu aleim. I'm reading from the Torah, Oir HaSholem. Mo'adei Hashem asher tikru oisam. Now, guys, oisam it could be written with a vav. Then you have to pronounce it oisam, them. But it's written aleph taf mem, which can also, al pidrush, be pronounced atem. But anyways, tikru oisam mikra kodesh, elehem mo'adoi. So the diuk of this brisa is from the word oisam. You should declare them oisam elehem oyadoi, which means only if you declare it on the potential days is your declaration effective. But lifnei zmanoi ein elehem oyadoi at kedei kach won't be effective. Okay, now lifnei zmanoi, the Gemara explains. And that's the pshat of the Marafulda. He took it from the Gemara, even though the Pnei Moshe we already learned says it can't even be. Don't take this literally. But lifnei zmani means esrem v'tishim yom. According to the Marafulda, that they declared day 29 into day 1. According to the Pnei Moshe, they declared on day 29 that tomorrow is day number 1. La'acheri buray, like we learned in the Marafulda, what's la'acheri buray? The yomi buray is day 30. La'acheri buray is shloishim u'shnayim yoim, day 32, which means they allow day 31 to remain day 31. It's ineffective. Day 31 automatically turns into day number 1. Okay, now that we quoted the Braisa, that learned the limud from the words from the pasuk in Emor, Elihem oyadoi, tikru oisam. So now another Braisa, learning something else from the same pasuk. Uminayin shemer Abraham es Hashanah al hagolu yoshe yatzush v'adayin lo higiu. Now we learned this properly in Kiddush HaChodesh, that there are primary reasons for which the Sanhedrin will decide to make a year into a leap year, and together with the primary reasons, there are secondary reasons. And the secondary reasons don't have to be connected to the seasons. Primary reasons is connected, like we want for Pesach to be in spring, right? Chodesh Aviv. Secondary reasons would be, we learned this over there, what were to happen if there was so much rain during the rain season that the roads and the bridges that allowed Yidden to come to the Beis HaMikdash on Pesach were broken and there wasn't enough time to fix them yet. This is similar. What happens if for whatever reason the Yidden left to reach the Beis HaMikdash for Pesach? It's one of the Shalosh Regalim. But if you're not going to add another month of Adar, they're not going to make it there on time. That is enough of a secondary reason to be Ma'amar Deshana. That is a reason. Talmud Loimer. So the pasuk begins, David el Bnei Yisrael. So the limud here is Bnei Yisrael Moyadei, which means Asei Esamoyadois. Establish the Yom Tov. What do you mean establish the Yom Tov? Even if you have to delay it by a full month, because you're going to add a year, you're going to make it into a leap year, do that. In order for Yidden to be able to celebrate the Yom Tov. Now, how far do we say that? That if the Yidden are delayed, now how many Yidden, I don't know, but if there's a substantial amount of Jews that won't make it to the Beis HaMikdash on time, that in itself is a secondary reason why you should make the year into a leap year. That's only, my friends, Amar Rav Shmuel bar Nachman, v'hon shehigiu lenahar peros. That's only if by adding a month, they'll be able to reach Nahar Peros at the end of the new Adar. Or let me word it differently. From when a Jew is by the Euphrates River, they need to have around 2 weeks to make it to the Beis HaMikdash. That is the normal speed of travel. So when you're speaking about adding a month, helping Jews get to the Beis HaMikdash, yeah, there's a point where adding a month won't even help. And what's the cheshbon? Through adding of the month, they should be able to get at the end of the new Adar, of Adar Sheni, to Nahar Peros. That means that they'll be able to make it to Yerushalmi, which is around a 15-day travel from Nahar Peros until the Beis HaMikdash, so the adding of the month will be effective. Says the Gemara Vayter, one final ruling regarding these dinim of being Mekadesh the Chodesh, Rabbi Yaakov Baracha, in the name of Rav Imi, in the name of Rabbi Yudah ben Pazi, says that if Beis Din was Mekadesh, Kitchu, based on the citing of 2 witnesses of the new moon, and then we discover that these 2 witnesses turn out to be conspiring witnesses, meaning the Torah tells us, let's go with that, it's Exeris HaKosov, that if a second pair of witnesses come and they don't directly challenge the testimony proper, but they tell Beis Din that the witnesses themselves were with us in another location, that we believe the second group, which means the first groups were conspiring witnesses. So it comes out that what they said is not true. So you would think that if the Edom turn out to be Edom Zoymimim, so whatever Beis Din did built on the testimony is automatically nullified. That's not the case. Narvas Hadezu Mekudesh. The month remains sanctified. Chom Rabbi Yosi im Rabbi Yudah ben Pazi. And Rabbi Yosi tells Rabbi Yudah, At Shomat min Avu Chadam Milsa. Is this something that you heard from Pazi? So he says, Amalei Cain, yes, indeed, I heard it from my father. And that somehow, the Pazi was such a great man, right? Godoil mirabon shemai, that if he said that, then everyone accepted it. Rabbi Abba, Amar, b'shem Rabbi Yechanan, based on this rule, ein medagdikin be'edah chodesh, that we don't have to be so meticulous when it comes to the interrogation of witnesses without getting into the great details. But the reason why one would be medagdik is because witnesses that you cannot be mizamim is not considered a witness, and the ways you would discover witnesses to be false witnesses is by really interrogating them and getting all the details, exactly where you were, what time of the day you were, and once, anyways, regardless of what they say, we're not going to be mizamim them. That automatically diminishes the need of being medagdik in their authenticity. I want to add another detail, that as we learned in the Rambam, that even though the Iker way of being Mekadesh the Chodesh is Dafka al Pi Hariyah, nevertheless there is an obligation on the Beis Din, on the Sanhedrin, to know the cheshbonos of the movements of the heavenly bodies. So they have to know prior to witnesses coming exactly if the moon would have been seen and exactly where it would be seen and in what position it's going to look like, etc. Like this, when the Eidim come, it's not like in most cases Beis Din doesn't know, and the witnesses are notifying Beis Din the Metzias. By Kiddush HaChodesh, Beis Din knows exactly what happened the night prior. They know that the moon was visible. They already know that the moon was not visible. They know that. Elamad, the Torah wants for something to be seen by Yidden. It has to be witnessed. It's a whole different type of edus. It's probably the only edus like this. They already know the Metzias. So that's another reason why you don't have to be medagdek, because you already know what is. Adarabba, the reason why sometimes the Rambam writes they would be medagdek is because if Beis Din had a secondary reason for which they are allowed to delay the length of a month, they want to make a chodesh into a chodesh me'ober, just like we just learned by Yashana making a shaman into a shana me'ober, they had the right to be so medagdek with the Eidim until they got so confused that they said, you know what, we're not certain anymore. And that's the way they circumvented by not having Eidim if there was a need, by adding a day to the month. In other words, it wasn't that much about relying on the Eidim, but it was doing what God wants by hearing it through Eidim. And now at Khan, the whole sugi of Kiddush HaChodesh, and now we're coming back to the Mishnah. Now there's a reason why, and you'll see the reason in a moment, but before the question and the reason why and the answer, we're going to review a piece of the Gemara that we had on Daf Pei. And that is that in the Mishnah, there is a clear contradiction. First, Mishnah tells you that a store credit is not considered a loan, and therefore it's not nullified, it's not canceled. Then the Mishnah gave the case, again, where the butcher sold the meat on the 30th, and it turned out that the 30th taka remained the 30th. He thought he gave it out on Rosh Hashanah. We're speaking about the 30th of the 7th year or the first day, Rosh Hashanah of the 8th year. When the butcher gives out the meat, it's a loan. If he gave it out on the beginning of the 8th year, why would that loan be canceled? You have to pay back your loans, pay back your debts. But if it turns out that the chodesh was mu'ubar and therefore he actually gave the loan on the 30th, so then the next day that loan is canceled. And the problem is that why would a store credit of meat ever become a loan when the Mishnah says it doesn't become a loan? And the answer is that it must be that the Mishnah follows not the Tanakama that says that only if you make it into a loan does it turn into a loan, but the Rabbi Yehuda, the Tana Rabbi Yehuda holds that every time a store gives out a second line of credit, so you buy once, and prior to paying, if he gives out another credit, automatically whatever was owed before turns into a choiv, a loan. And therefore, again, even though the Mishnah doesn't write it explicitly, the case must be that after the butcher giving out the meat on the 30th of Elul or on the 1st of Rosh Hashanah, there was some other product that the same butcher gave to the same customer. It must be that way. And therefore, it made the meat into a loan. Elama, the question is, was the loan on the end of the 7th or was the loan on Rosh Hashanah? And that is not sufficient, and let's read it inside. And there was a back and forth. That and Amar Rabbi Lazar, the Amoyre Rabbi Lazar says, number one, for the Mishnah not to be contradicting itself, it must be that this Shita follows Rabbi Yehuda, which means that there was some other item sold by the same butcher to the same customer, and now the meat became a loan. Problem is that this in itself is also not enough. Why not? Let's go again. The Torah writes in the same pasuk that Shamoit kol Baal Ma'ashayode. We said this when we began this Perek. That's a mitzvah saseh. Shamoit then means to let be, to let rest. It's like the Rambam writes by Hilchos Shabbos that Shvisa is a positive commandment, the way we paskin. It's not just don't do work. Resting is a positive commandment. There is a mitzvah saseh of Shamoit. Shamoit means not to connect in the positive. Let it be. Let go of. Then the pasuk says, "Lo yigois," don't collect. And there is a link between shamoit and lo yigois. And the concept is that wherever the lo yigois is inapplicable, so then there's no shamoit either. Can you collect a loan on Rosh Hashanah? The answer is not in a normal way. Certainly not directly. So the question is, "V'ro l'tovei b'Rosh Hashanah." Okay, so the guy he made a second sale. Okay, and therefore the first sale of the meat turned automatically into a loan. Okay, and that day remained the 30th of Elul. Okay, so what? L'chu'ura, since they were behaving on that day as it is Yom Tov, they didn't know that then. Why did the guy buy meat? Not to eat meat Erev Yom Tov. No one did that. He thought he needed meat because it was Yom Tov. He thought it was Yom Tov. On Yom Tov, you anyways don't collect a loan. So the kasha is, if anyways he was not going to collect it, so Hashem did not need to tell him, lo yigois. So then if lo yigois doesn't apply, then the shamai doesn't apply, then why should it be nullified? Why should it be canceled? So the answer for this is Rabbi says in the name of Rab Ze'era that since mikivin shuro lahamino iro, don't look at it that way. Not everything is about the physical. Could he have collected it or not? We look more at the potential. And we're going to stand this concept that a store owner would not extend credit a second time only if he is someone who is trustworthy in the eyes of the store owner. What does trustworthy mean when it comes to a loan? Trustworthy means that I feel confident if I'm the store owner that whenever I will go and collect it from you, you're not going to default on me. I trust you that you'll pay. So it's a debt that's ro'ui to be tavoid. Umikivin shuralu tavoy ro litin loimois. And let me tell you the way we learned it. I'm just repeating how we learned it on Daf Pei, the different ways of reading this into the words of the Gemara. First of all, there is the trustworthiness. And that's because he feels that not only if he mamish needs, he's able, but actually, let's add a detail. What a storekeeper is allowed to do on Yom Tov is to take a mashkin. Just like when he makes a sale, he can sell something, but the sale has to be very vague. Mashkin is the perfect payment that's vague. It's the same vague. You don't know exactly how much he owes. We do not evaluate on Yom Tov the value of the mashkin. Could be the mashkin is not worth the debt. Could be the mashkin is more money than the debt. Doesn't matter. Point is that this type of trusting that the storekeeper affords the customer, which is why it turned into a debt. It is a debt that on some level he would have been able to collect it, not directly, indirectly, by collecting a mashkin.
But isn't any mashkin muksa?
No, why is it a mashkin? By the way, people do that. I mamish mean it.
No, they go behind the store, right? But
people do it right now. Yeah, they go. It happens a lot on Yom Tov. I remember this by mashke when the mashke runs out, and every case is a case. You know, the guy says leave something. Leave your gartel. In other words, who's going to hold cup? Who was here? Who was there?
No, so it's like a reminder, basically. Okay,
it's a reminder, mamish. But theoretically, what happens if I'm not going to leave my gartel? I'm going to leave something that I'm going to leave my siddur that I got that 100 years old. That's worth $1,000, and I'm buying 2 bottles of whiskey. No, and in that case, if at the end I would have defaulted, the storekeeper would take ownership of my mashkin and only keep the value that is owed and return the rest. But I'm saying it is. No, don't tell me it's not lo yigois. There is a possibility of collecting. Okay, now why? Let's go weiter. Rav Ba, you'll see there's a link now. There's something new now. Rav Ba bar Mamol, again, in the name, that's how we're learning it, of Amram, and in the name of Rav Masna, in the name of Rav. Here we go. Hamal ves chaveiroi. This is important, guys. If a person gives a loan, on the condition, now who made that condition? Look at the borrower made that condition. It's not only let's say not only do I need money, but I'm telling you, listen, I'm only going to do you the favor of accepting your loan on the condition that you're never going to demand payment. So again, what's the Havamina? The Havamina is that you would think that wherever the lo yigois is not needed or it doesn't apply, so then the shamoit kol bal masha yadei also does not apply, and therefore the loan you might have thought will not be canceled. So it was said in the name of Rav that anyways is going to be canceled. Yes, shvi'is misham tesoi. That's the way I used to heard it from my Rebbes when I was younger. Or here, misham matzoi. Okay. And why is that? Because let me tell you the same. The Gemara. How do you get it from what we just said right now? What did we just say right now? That even where payment is not going to be collected in the normal means on Yom Tiv, since ro l'tavoi and ro l'haminoi, and the way we worded it, that a mashkin could have been given. And by the way, when a guy gives a loan, al manashe loy l'tavoi, I just want to tell you the din. Hi Mordechai, that when you give a loan, guys, halk up. Imagine I give you a loan, and we both agreed I'll never demand payment. If I seized a mashkin, if I took a mashkin, I keep it. And that's why it is in the parsha of Yigois, for which the Torah says, lo Yigois. And yes, Shamoit, that's the word, that's the link, that's why the Gemara repeated all of this. Now, the ha'tani, again, legirsa, that shvius, yes, will cancel the loan. So this, the ha'tani is not a kasha, but it's b'nichusa. For ha'tani, as we just learned right now, and again, we were chazering. And Rabbi says Rabbi Yehuda. And that's not enough, because the kasha is, again, bit me of ro, hul, Rosh Hashanah. And the answer is, like we just said, Muslim Zagin, that because ro l'tavai. Okay, so since ro l'tavai, and as we said at the end, and if a mashkin would have been taken, it would have been payment. So let's apply the same thing over here. That even though the lender lent the money, al manashe loy l'tavai, but if the lender were to seize a payment, if he were to chop something, then he would be able to keep it. The money is owed, so it is begeder lo yigois, and it is begeder, and therefore it's bound by the shamait. That loan will be canceled. So that's a good comparison. Says the Gemara, no, I reject your comparison, because that mikivin should all ravoi either lotavoi or lahamino echavre daf pei beis amid beis is kimi should all lotavoi umikivin should all lotavoi is kimi should all litin mois. They're different. So actually, says the Gemara, by the case of Yom Tiv, the lender on Yom Tiv is allowed to ask for a mashkin. So since he's allowed to ask for a mashkin, for him the Torah says lo yigois. When a person lends money, al menashe lo l'tavoi, he's not allowed to go and get a mashkin. Now, if he did it, if he seized the money, I get it. But that was an act that he was not allowed to do. V'kan ho v'huroi litin loy v'loy nasan is 1 second. V'kan over here. I'm going back to the case of, now this doesn't really fit in over here, but we're going back to the case of the Mishnah. And again, we're just making it clear that the case of the Mishnah must have been that the butcher made another sale. And when he made the other sale prior to that, he could have taken a mashkin. He didn't take it. It becomes a bona fide nasis and a shoyna milva. In contrast to the case of Hamalvas Chaveri Al Manashe Lo L'Tovoi, he bound himself not to collect. Now the Gemara is not arguing with that halacha, but what we are saying is that your raya from the Mishnah is not a correct raya. In our Mishnah, there is on some level a possibility of collection on Yom Tiv, the way we're learning, and Al Manashe Lo L'Tovoi means that there is no way that you are lechatchila allowed to make any type of collection. And therefore, maybe the logic could be, since loy shayach, loy yigois, loy shayach shamoid.
That's a question.
Yes.
The case where he actually took a mashkin for the loan still get canceled?
The loan, in other words, the loan.
But you owe me money, but Shemitah comes, and now.
No, before Shemitah, I lend you money, Almanas, that I'm never going to make collection. If I took a mashkin, Danny, I keep the mashkin. If you want your mashkin back, you have to pay the loan. But I was not allowed to seize the mashkin. That's the nakuda. But if I did it, I get to keep it. I'll tell you better. Forget about a mashkin. If I lent you $100 and I take out of your pocket $100, I get to keep the money. No. Forget about Shemitah. On this type of loan. That's the question. In other words,
I understand. I'm just saying He's canceling a loan or not canceling a loan.
So let's go to what Rav says. Rav says, according to our Girsa, he writes that Shvi'is will cancel the loan. Shvi'is cancels the loan, which means that if I would have seized $100 before Shvi'is, I would keep it. Even though I was never allowed to collect, but I collected. The money is mine. You owed me the money. Once Shvi'is comes, if I took from you $100, I have to give it back to you. Because Shvi'is canceled the loan.
If I have a mashkin, the loan gets, I have to give back the mashkin.
No. The Mishnah says the mashkin once I took a mashkin. You're asking if I took a mashkin before Shemitah. What are you asking? Okay, I'm sorry. That's the Mishnah wrote. In any loan, forget about Amana Shaloi L'Tova. In any single loan, if I took a mashkin before Shvi'is, since I have no need of approaching you, because I already have your mashkin, so lo yigois is inapplicable. So the cancellation of the loan is also inapplicable. I keep the mashkin. Clear? The Mishnah, yes, came on.
I'm just wondering, what if the mashkin is of no value? How does the guy...
I'm speaking about a mashkin of value, Kevin. In other words, let's go back to the case of the Mishnah. If I took a mashkin for a loan, let's say everything has value. Let's say I loaned you $100, and the mashkin was $1. The $1 I get to keep.
Okay.
You don't say, since the loan is canceled, I have to give you back your mashkin. No, the $1 value part of the loan was already collected before. I already collected it. God is not telling me to cancel something that was already canceled. It was already collected. And now, me'inyan le'inyan, look inside this. This is huge. And huge meaning how everything changes, obviously, if the Girsa is different. So Rabbi Yosi, Berabun, says again in the name of Rav, Hamalve es chaveroi, and here he says explicitly that he doesn't want to abide by the laws of the Torah. Now, generally, guys, what's the general rule? Then, Hamasna al Masha Kosav B'Torah. Generally, if a guy makes a Tanai, and the Tanai is for the person to weasel out that which the Torah said is. Your words are ineffective. But by financial matters, generally, your words are effective. Because just like I have the right to give to you something, forget about, I have the right to give something that's mine to you. You have the right to give something that's yours to me. We have that right. So if I want to waive a certain protection or a certain financial right, we're talking about financial protection, I have the right to waive it. You have the right to waive it. Let's read it. That was the condition that was made. On the condition, Shvi should not cancel it. So, guys, the words that we have is Ein Hashvis Mishamatzoi. Indeed, the Tanai is effective. The Tanai is effective, and therefore the loan will not be canceled. Now, I just want you to see, the differences. Look inside the Rash Shirilio towards the end of the right column, probably 5 or 6 lines before the bottom of the right column. You'll see Almanas Shaloi Tishmatenu Shvi'is. Shvi is yes mishametes. The opposite. I'm reading because the kiv and the shvi is ein mesuda be yodei lahasnu yisrael. What do you mean? I know it's a financial, but it's not a financial. What do you mean you're saying that you don't want shvi'is to cancel the loans? God says shvi'is cancels the loans. So your words are ineffective. Look inside on the top of the Pnei Moshe, all the way on top of the Amid. Almanah shaloi tishtamtenu shvi'is. So the Girsa that we will learn, let's go with the Pnei Moshe. We can go both ways, but I don't think we have enough time. We're going to go with the Pnei Moshe. That Almanah shaloi shvi'is should not cancel. Your words are effective. Look inside the top. Ein hashvi'is mishamatzoi. And he says, Kachi agirsa, gam beperek hama demakis halacha beis. And accordingly, whether the hemshech is akasha or the hemshech of the Gemara is araya, the whole Gemara's back and forth is going to be flipped 180, whether you follow the gears of the Rash Ilyo or if you follow the gears of the Pnei Moshe. We're going to go, let's not with the Pnei Moshe. So they're saying, B'Shem Rav, that your words are effective. I don't want the loan to be canceled. Okay, the loan is not canceled. And now...
Wait, but your words can cancel anything of monetary situations versus Torah?
So that's the way. That's the general rule. There
What
is a
about in
general rule.
Yerusha? Okay.
Very good. I'm very happy. That's a great example. You're backing up the Rashi earlier. Yerusha, you would argue, is a financial, but it's not a financial. Why is that? Because when a person says that after my passing, I want for my things to go to any other way other than what the Torah says, the reason why my words, Kevad, in that case, will not be effective, because after my passing, I do not own it to have the balabatishkeit to determine how it should be distributed.
Got
In contrast, if a person makes a halachic will, which basically would mean that he makes binding the words, the desire, that a moment before my demise, I want my things to go in any way that I want. That will be effective. But that's already different. Here the guy gives a loan. All he's saying is, Almanas Shvius should not cancel it. Okay, if you made that condition, Rav says, then Shvius does not cancel. Okay, now like this. I just want to say the following. There is a Mishnah in Makis, and that's also why he brought, when we just, the Pnei Moshe quotes this from Pedekama de Makis, people are learning Daf HaYomi, they learned this not that long ago. So here's the scenario. And again, second time today, Eidim Zoymimim. Now I know that we mentioned that by Kiddush HaChodesh, Eidim Zoymimim, we don't care if they became Zoymimim. But normally, what's the rule of Eidim Zoymimim? Number one is that Hashem believes the second group of witnesses over the first. The first, therefore, from the perspective of Beis Din, the first group were liars. They were conspiring to use the Beis Din to commit a crime. And let's speak about a financial crime. So the Torah gives the general punishment, whatever they conspire to do, so should happen to them. If based on their false testimony, Reuven would have lost $100, they are going to be the ones losing $100. Now, the case of the Mishnah is that there was a debt, and the emes is there was a debt. Let's go to Reuven and Shimon. Reuven loaned 1,000 zuz to Shimon. No debate, Shimon owes the money. The only question is, when is the loan due? Now, what they said was, the Eidim Zoymimim, listen to this, Dan. Yeah, the loan was a stam loan. Stam loan is for 30 days. Shimon has to pay the 1,000 zuz, day 30 from the day of the loan. The emes was, and Beis Din now finds out the emes, there was a loan, but Shimon had 10 years to pay it back. Now, the fact Shimon had to pay the money back, but what were they causing through their attempted lie? For Shimon to pay it back, basically 10 years early. What damage is that? You can't say that the Eidim Zoymimim were causing Shimon through their lie 1,000 zuz damage. It's not true. Because Shimon would have to pay the 1,000 zuz b'soif eser shanim. So what do is you make a cheshbon, how much value does one give for you being able to keep the 1,000 zuz in your pocket for 9 years, 11 months, and 20 days. That's what the Mishnah says, which makes sense. But now we have a bomb question. What's the bomb question? In a 10-year period, there's always going to be a shvi'is. The Gemara is right now equating that Hamalvas Chaverei Almana Sheloi Tishamtenu Shvi'is, we are equating it to someone giving a loan that's due in 10 years. We're making this right now into the same. Same meaning that on the Shvi'is here, the loan is not due. So after 10 years, it will be due. Does it cancel the loan? Does it not cancel the loan? If we're going to say the way our Girsa is, that it doesn't, Shvi'is does not cancel the loan, which means, therefore, the same, that if I lend you money for 10 years, the Shvi'is does not cancel the loan, that would be a way of circumventing Shvi'is. We are equating it. Then the Mishnah makes sense. Because, again, what does the Mishnah say? That the Eidim Zoymimim have to pay the value of how much would one pay if one would be allowed. We're not allowed to pay ribis, which is the concept of ribis, but not ribis. How much would one pay to be allowed to hold on to 1,000 zuz for another 9 years and 11 months and 20 days? That's the difference. But at the end, he would have to pay. Now, if we're not going to follow Rav, Ligir Saseinu, if Shvi'is would cancel the loan, equating it. If I lend you money for 10 years, we're equating now. The loan would be canceled. Then the Eidim Zoimimim have to pay the whole 1,000 zuz. Because the emes is that the loan would have been canceled. But the Mishnah doesn't say that. The Mishnah says make the cheshbon. Let's read it inside. And that's the v'hataninan according to the Pnei Moshe and the others that follow his girsa. And the proof is from the Mishnah in Makis. That all the Edom have to pay. I know it's a nice penny, but all they have to pay is the difference that Shimon would have paid. They noised and they can't right, which is what the lie was. Ubein noised and they can't shonim. But they have to, but not the whole 1,000 zuz. So now the Gemara says that's the makeba patish of the proof. The yesh eser shanim beloy shmita. Is that just like if I lend you money for 10 years, ein hashvi'is mishametes. Rav, same thing. Al malves chaverei al menashe loy tisham tenu shvi'is. Also, according to us, ein hashvi'is mishamatzoi. That is a proof. Says the Gemara Rafunam. I reject your proof. Because Ispalgun Rav Nachman bar Yaakov Rav Sheshes. When it comes to the Mishnah and Makis, we already have Amoyroim that said that the case of the Mishnah is either b'malva al hamashkoin, again, and that is emes, and we learned in our Mishnah cave, and again, the second time, and now we have it today, that if there is a mashkin, the shvius is not mishamit. And that's why all you have to do to punish the Edom Zoimimim is to make the calculation of what's the value of holding on to money for almost 10 years. Or v'charna Amar, that the Mishnah in Makis is only referring to a case because of loy peruzbal. Fakert. Okay. Says the Gemara weiter, Tonein. Now we have a Braisa that's very enigmatic. The words of the...
For these answers, someone not going to let someone 10 years, it would get canceled.
It would get canceled. And actually, and then we are equating. Hamalvas chavedai almana sheloy tishamtenu shvis mishamatzoi. In other words, even though we spoke this up when we began the big machloikas of the Rishonim, and actually the Alter Rebbe we says we paskin lechumra like the Rosh. The Rosh says clearly that there are two steps to a loan to a cancellation of a loan. The way the Rosh words it, there's that which happens at the end of the 6th going into the 7th, which is that the loan itself is there, but you cannot collect it. But besoif shvi'is, besoif the 7th year, the loan itself is nullified. Upshot, you cannot collect it. Now, if we're going to go into that second step, the second step means the loan is canceled. If I have a due date in 10 years, I can't collect it before the 10 years, but there is a loan. And shvi'is cancels the loan. It works.
So, why would anybody lend anybody money? The whole concept of a pruzbal, or why would anybody do that knowing that shvi'is is going to kick in?
Let me word it this way. Why would anyone agree to take a loan for 10 years? And the answer would be they would take a mashkin, or they would write a pruzbal. That's the answer. That's the answer.
But can you say that if they don't have a pruzbal, it should automatically kick in anyway? If they forgot?
No. That's the machloikas that we are learning right now. According to the way the Pnei Moshe is learning the Gemara, according to Rav, guys, don't minimize Rav. Rav is saying that you don't even have to take a mashkin. Rav is saying is that, I can tell you, Bekitzin, let's go weiter. I'll say it before I forget it, that when I learned Bava Basra in Miami by Rabbi, and I think in Dafei in the beginning, right, they have the Machloikas Amiroim, whether there's a chazaka that Adam Perei Atoich Zmanoi or ain't Adam Perei Atoich Zmanoi. And that was the same Nakuda. In other words, to think about it, it's very much related to this topic. In other words, let's go that if you give a loan for 10 years, there's a loan. I'm chayiv. No one can collect from me. Those who would argue that I would pay toich zmanai because I don't want to owe money. And that's why shviya should be meshamit, unless you take a pruzbal. Let's go back. Tony, we learned, now the words are hard to understand. These are the words. Shloishim yom v'lo isoi. 30 days, he can't come. Vas meintes. What does this Braisa mean? No, it's telling you the general rule that if you're malva es chaveroi stam and you don't specify what date is the date when the loan comes due, stam alva shloishim yom she'ein reshoy l'tovai, you can't collect until 30 days. No, any unspecified loan due in 30 days. And all Rabbi Yehuda v'Amar Tama. Let me give you this sources Mamish Gavaldik. That when it says in Parshas Re'eh, the psukim that we're learning about regarding Shemitah, that Kor v'Shnas Hasheva, Shnas Hashmita, the Torah is telling you exactly Kevin what you are addressing. People won't want to lend money. The pasuk reads in its entirety that a shomer locha pen yia davar im levavcha belial. Belial is normally used by avodah zarah or by not lending money. Lemor, that what these words, it's kor v'shnas hasheva shnas hashmita v'roin chabachicho evim l'sitaloi v'kor l'chashem v'chachet nasan tito in pesayach tiftach. So the question is, it's like superfluous. Kor v'shnas hasheva shnas hashmita loy hi shnas hasheva v'loy hi shnas hashmita. It can just say karva shnas hasheva, right, Danny? Or karva shnas hashmita. It's a repetition. So ma Talmud loimer both karva shnas hasheva shnas hashmita. Oh, here you have the source of 30 days. Shaloi toim ar kol shloishim yom en rolo tavai ula achar shloishim yom bahashmit ksafim v'uleig benom, which means what? So again, let's go with the let's go with the Pnei Moshe. We're learning the Gemara of the Pnei Moshe. Pnei Moshe is 6 lines from the bottom. What happens if a person is exactly 30 days before Shemitah? A person will say, if I'm going to give him a loan, karva, because of the rule that if I lend the money stam, I can only connect it at the end of 30 days. And we're speaking about a case that on the 30th day, the 30th day will be Rosh Hashanah of the 8th year. So now I won't be able to ever collect it, and therefore I should not want to loan the money. In other words, the Torah is hinting to you that there is a time before the beginning, before the end of the 7th year, that you already won't lend money. What is that time? 30 days before. Why 30 days before? Now, it doesn't say in the pasuk 30 days, but that's the way they make that ayah. Is that ayah, v'hu like beno, lefum kein, tzarech meimar, karva shnas hashneva, shnas hashmita. So somehow the pasuk is alluding that any unspecified loan only is due on 30 days. Again, quoting Rabbi. Rabbi used to say, Yaakov went with a Yamalka. What's the ayah? Vayetze Yaakov. What you think he went without a Vayetze Yaakov? That's the same type of ayah over here. It's a given already that there's a 30-day term. What you see from over here is that there was some time prior that you can't collect a loan. That's why the Torah repeats twice, Karva Shnas Hasheva, Shnas Hashmita.
But all unspecified loans are 30 days?
All unspecified loans cannot be collected